Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and this is the Storyteller Forecast for Gemini for May 2016. Go to my website, anniehelpsyou.com, and check out my most recent blog posts on the topics of astrology and health and other things. And while you're there, sign up for my free email newsletter and become part of my community and get the perks that go along with that. So what's going on in May? We've got so much to talk about, but let's talk about what I'm most excited about, which is birthdays. Birthdays are one of the most powerful times for you to make wishes. When the sun in the sky gets back to the same place that it was at when you were born, which is your solar return, there's a portal that's opened for your desires. The sun in the chart represents what you want, where you shine bright, what makes you sizzle with passion and excitement. So when you've got the sun in the sky getting back to the same point as it was in your chart, you've got this double crackling, sizzling portal that opens up. If you want to have more information on how to do your birthday wishes to facilitate their coming true, I have a new video out, and it should be out just the same day or just one day after I post this Gemini one. And it's called Making Your Wishes Come True. And it talks about birthday wishes and all kinds of other wishes as well. So you might want to watch that and get some tips to maximize your birthday time. So birthdays are this wonderful time of year when we get to have a clean slate, do something new, do something different. We have something called a solar return chart, which actually is a chart that changes around the time of our birthday. So there actually is a new imprint that we're working with, and something new and something different. The time before your birthday is when the sun moves into the 12th house. So this can be anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks before your birthday, or before the sun, if you're watching for your rising sign, before the sun moves over your ascendant, the 3 to 5 weeks before then, when the sun is in your 12th house. This is the time when we prepare for the rebirth. And as part of the process for preparing for the rebirth, we have to visit some old ghosts sometimes. The 12th house is the house of fears. And besides Gemini's having this sun energy there, there are also other energies like Mercury and Venus there, and even more for some of you. So lots of short-term energy in the 12th house. And the 12th house is this quiet place. It's like the quiet before the storm, or the quiet before the party, the quiet before the celebration. It's like getting yourself in order, getting things situated so that you're ready to bust out with all this new stuff. So it can be a little bit stressful though, because the 12th house rules the things that we try to not think about. And in general, Gemini energy is very good at having a lot of mental chatter, but it's not, unless you have a lot of significant energy in Cancer or some of the water signs, Gemini energy is more of a mental sign rather than like a getting lost in the feeling of something. It's like getting lost in the story or the mental aspects of it. And the 12th house is a water house, so it doesn't blend very well with how you are. So it's like those things that you avoid or that you don't have time for, that you sweep under the rug, or things that are ancestral or genetic, karmic, things that you might not even be aware of, are all in this deep place of the unconscious mind, which is the place that has this bright spotlight on it right before your birthday. So it's like saying, okay, we're going to put you in a good place to figure out what you want to ask for your birthday by putting you in a situation where you're very clear on what you don't want. And things could be coming up that you say, well, wow, I really don't want that. Okay, well, what do you want? It's this beautiful, masterful plan of the universe that makes you look at those dark places as part of the process for rebirth. Okay, so something else I'm incredibly excited about in general is that Jupiter is going direct in May. I'm a Sag, so I'm ruled by Jupiter, so I always get worked up about Jupiter, but I think that this is a very positive thing for everyone, because although Jupiter can bring challenges just like any other planet, many of the manifestations are very benevolent, and there's a lot of expansion and growth movement and positive change and enthusiasm and optimism in the area where Jupiter moves. So at the end of last year for the early degree placement, so like May 20th, 21st, 22nd, whenever it's, whatever date it started on, the year you were born, through like around May 30th, you are early degree placements. The 31st through around the 9th, your middle degree placements. And then the 10th or so to like the 19th are the late degree placements. If you're watching for your rising sign, 0 to 9 degrees is early, 10 to 19 degrees is middle, and 20 to 29 degrees is late. The reason why I waste my precious breath or use my precious breath to go over the early, middle, and late designations is because your chart could look drastically different for the month depending on where you are in that spectrum. It's not just the same for everyone. It's like if you imagine that you're standing on a line for something at a store or maybe at a parade. The people at the beginning of the line, they might be getting like hors d'oeuvres or things handed to them, and the other people are like, oh, hey, I see something going on down there. I feel the activity of it, but it hasn't gotten down the line yet. That's how the transits occur. They move from the front of the line to the back of the line. So if you have a later degree placement, you will have to wait longer for a lot of these things that are occurring first for the early degree placements. And that could stagger the time frame and make your month look a little bit different if you have a later degree placement or certain parts of a middle degree placement, etc. That's why I take the time to do it. So an example of this will come later as I talk about Saturn. But before that, I want to still talk about Jupiter. Jupiter was starting to expand the early degree placement's fourth house of home, of family, of house size or experience of house. It's a subjective experience of expansion. For some people, moving out to the country is expansion. For some people, getting out of a rural town into a city where there are possibilities, more possibilities, that's expansive to them. Some people not being married to a large mortgage and downsizing to a tiny home, that's expansive to them. And other people, Jupiter can rule expanding actually into a bigger house. But whatever that looks like for you, the energy of home and family was starting to expand towards the end of last year for the early degree placements, mostly May born, or 0 to 9 degrees or so. And then it went retrograde in the beginning of January. So all of you, actually early, middle, and late degree placements did start to have some energy in the fourth house. The late degree placements had some in the third house still. So then when Jupiter went retrograde, it started sleeping or doing things in the backdrop. It's kind of like testing energy for future expansion. Like if you send a crew out to make sure that your lot is solid to build a 20-story building, if you don't take the time to do that first, you can build a 20-story building and it will collapse into the ground. Jupiter tested the expansion at the end of last year, and then it pulled back from January into May. Then on May 9th, when it goes direct again, it will have done a lot of the work from finding out what were the weak links with the last round of expansion and what needed to be strengthened so that with the next round of expansion, you can manage even more expansion and growth. So lots of things involving the fourth house. Some of the later degree placements might have some things with the third house, and the third house has to do with writing and communicating and editing. Siblings also are there, and cousins and uncles and aunts are there, and transportation, your cars and vehicles and things like that. So some of you might have expansion in those areas. For the early and middle degree placements, all of this energy is in, for the short term, in the 12th house, as we were talking about before. But the later degree placements, they don't have that yet. It's in the 11th house. The 11th house has to do with teams and groups and internet-based activities and friends and friendships and social circles and social media and community projects. So either you're having like your Harry Potter experience of going deep within and tapping into the all that is and looking where your fears are sourced from with the 12th house, or you're being thrown kind of out into a social realm. And they're pretty distinctly different. So it's going to be like that for different Geminis depending on their placement. Now, there's something else big about Saturn that I want to talk about. But before I get there, I want to give more of this kind of cover story of what's going on in May. So we talked about the fact that Jupiter's going direct, and I'm excited about that. What we didn't talk about is that there are a massive number of trines in the month of May, which is also very exciting. Trines are 120-degree angles. They are thought to be the most favorable in astrology. They bring easy, smooth, harmonious experiences that just get served to you. Since we are also simultaneously in Mars and Mercury retrograde, these gifts that are handed to you from the trines and Jupiter going direct will likely have some sort of basis in the past, going back over something, going back into something you were working on, accolades or information or advancement or opportunities from things that you've done before. And it's just coming to you now. It's catching up with itself. So all of that's happening. In the meantime, Mars went retrograde April 17th through June 29th. If you haven't already watched my Mars retrograde video or read my Mars retrograde blog on my website, anniehelpsyou.com, I highly recommend you do that, because Mars only goes retrograde once every 2-ish years. So we're not as familiar with the implications and the do's and the don'ts and the things to be aware of as we are with Mercury. Mars rules your oomph. It's the energy of initiation. It's that spark of creation. And when it's retrograde, it's not the best time for launches or initiating anything. So here we've got all this energy of enlivening with Jupiter. We've got the energy of trines with multiple trines throughout the month. But then we've got Mars going retrograde. And then April 28th through May 22nd, we have Mercury going retrograde. So there's a tremendous amount of energy that wants to go backwards and is also showing us that as opportunities come, you very likely may not have the whole story. Either someone's purposely withholding it from you, or you haven't taken the time to ask because you got excited and said yes too quickly. So try to at least avoid making an official agreement till after May 25th if possible, and wait even longer if you can, because the longer you move out from May 22nd, the more Mercury will at least regulate. If you can push your agreements into July when both Mars and Mercury are direct, that might be better, but you have to feel into your individual situation. Maybe that just won't work there, you know? And there are also transits that could be going on in your personal chart that could supersede some of this. So these are general guidelines. But since Mars is going retrograde, telling us not a time to launch, not a time to do important new things that you want to be long-term. If you're doing something new like having a 6-month rental, yeah, you still need to watch your contracts carefully, but it's a 6-month rental, it's short-term. You know, I'm not as worried about things for the short term with Mercury and Mars being retrograde. It's more the things that you're hoping will be long-term and you're banking on them being long-term, and then they mostly turn out they're not going to be long-term, and you invested in them as if they were. And this goes for relationships as well, which I go over more in the Mars retrograde blog and video. So what that means is this is the month of the spider. When you watch a spider weave a web, they weave the web in the active time, and then they sit back and they wait for the food to come to them. And this is what May is about. May is about you've already spent the time in the past weaving a web. And now in May, you're not going out trying to get food. You're not going out trying to spin a web. You're hanging out with what you've created and seeing what comes to you. And then carefully being discerning with what you do with what comes to you. So now back to this thing with Saturn. Saturn for many Geminis has been carrying even more weight than it usually does, because if you have placements between 8 and 18 degrees, or if your birthday is the last couple of days, several days in March in the first week or so, you've been having Saturn either sitting directly on your sun or directly on your 7th house cusp. When something's on your 7th house cusp, it's making a 180-degree angle to your 1st house cusp, which it rules yourself and your physical body. The 7th house has to do with your relationship, so it's like me versus we. And whenever you have an outer planet at that particular point in your chart, it stirs up a massive amount of change. So in the years, and for some of you earlier placements, you've already had a lot of this go on, and now it's highlighting this, more middle group, and then the later degree placements will have this coming. Saturn will often bring big changes. A lot of work, discipline, persistence. The earlier and some middle degree placements, so like the beginning of the sign, May 20, 21st, 22nd, through around the 9th or so of June, you will have had Saturn moving through the 7th house, solidifying your relationships. So you have a long-term story of being more meticulous and present and consistent with your relationships. Gemini energy has a tremendous amount of movement to it. It's scattered, it's all over the place, it's distracted, and sometimes it can be non-committal. That's not to say that you're like that for sure. Maybe you have a bunch of Taurus and just a little bit of Gemini, and you're just like super persistent and solid and reliable. But Gemini energy is like a butterfly. You don't know where it's going to be in 2 seconds. It's over here, whoop, now it's over here, whoop. And that's the beautiful energy of Gemini. It's ever changing, it's interesting, it's charming, it's funny, it's witty, but it doesn't know what it's doing at any given moment, and so it can't commit to you per se. So there's been this story going on for Geminis that things that you want are going to come to you through committing to relationships. And that's partnerships, romantic partnerships, work partnerships, client partnerships, committing to the energy of relationship. For the later degree placements, you still have Saturn moving through your 6th house. And so for many of you, you are having health issues come up. Saturn can be a very heavy, dense force. And yes, it can bring wonderful things to fruition. That's the upside of Saturn. But sometimes to receive the upside of Saturn, you have to do the work and have the consistent persistence of the lower side of Saturn. So if you have health things coming up, there are some things that you might look into. If you have enigmatic health situations, there's more and more evidence that many problems like multiple sclerosis, cancer, and rheumatoid arthritis, and name any of the big ones, all manner of cardiovascular disease, etc. A lot of those problems they're finding now are actually based in viruses. And you can see this from cancer research, where they're starting to see a lot of HPV viruses that increase genetic predisposition, or not genetic, just predisposition to certain types of cancers. So if you get a genetic test, you might find the source of an enigmatic health problem that has been plaguing you possibly for your whole life. Many people are going to find out that they have a problem with how they process toxins through their liver. And because of that, it sets off this whole cascade of problems in the body that leave you a vulnerable host to bacteria and viruses. And some of those bacteria or viruses could be what is causing the problem. And when you clear up the virus and the bacteria by understanding how you're not processing toxins, which can be pinpointed with the genetic tests, then you might be able to heal this long-standing, supposedly uncurable thing. I'm seeing people more and more all the time healing things that are allegedly incurable. I'm not a doctor. It's not my department to do that, but I can make recommendations for people that I would go to. So Saturn wants work. There's a genetic test called 23andMe, and it's $200, but I'm sure you've spent a lot more than that already trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with you if you're having this situation go on with Saturn. So, it might save you a whole bunch of money in the future to just know what your body can do and what it can't do. Okay, so these are the things that are going on in May, including information and energy still from the eclipses, which could have brought radical news and radical change. If you want any help navigating through this, you can go to my website, anniehelpsyou.com. You can check out my personal coaching packages. You can check out my Train Your Brain programs, which help you to lay new neuronal pathways in your brain, which are the seeds for new and better experiences in your life. While you're there, sign up for my free email newsletter and become part of my community and get perks. So I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll see you next month. Bye.